Yeah.
architecture and design.
Yeah.
Then basically you build features on top of it.
Yeah.
So based on your last 6 years, what you are seeing?
I think the truth is in the middle, right? So, I mean, absolutely. So at the end of the day, if I want to kind of use Scrum language, right? Product owner owns what is going to get built, or they own the priority of the backlog, okay? The team owns the how it's going to get built. Personally, what I like to encourage is I like to encourage early collaboration on the sequencing of that backlog. Because again, right, if we're not aggressively paying attention to the risk on our project, we don't quantitatively know that we've got any shot in the world at getting done. Right? So if I want to jump out and use like pure Agile language, I'd say, we need to start spiking things early in iteration 0, iteration 1, so we can learn about the solution, and we can basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to stabilize our backlog. I've worked on a lot of my early Agile projects when I was trying to just get my hands around all this stuff. My backlog never, ever went down. Okay, I had 800 points. Next iteration, I had 800 points. But we did like 100 points that iteration. Well, why did we do 100 but we didn't burn down? Well, it's because they identified something that they didn't know. Right? There was a tremendous amount of uncertainty going on. Right? So the only thing that I'm suggesting here is that this collaboration between IT and the business, if we focus on that and we think about strategically reducing risk on projects as early as possible, I believe that we've got a better shot at converging on something that the business wants within the time and cost constraints that they want it. Anybody disagree? Is that not Agile?
I guess my question is,
yeah.
Scope variable, aren't you then potentially setting yourself up for closing the project with an open backlog of issues that you've got to come back sometime in the future and do another project to close that backlog?
Possibly. But I think what it sounds like I'm hearing you say is that scope is actually fixed.
What I'm saying is if scope is not fixed, how do you prevent that? Because especially on teams that they're not always moving on to the next version of the same product.
Right.
If they're moving on to a completely different project, then how do you manage that?
See, I think I think what I'm hearing you say is we've got an interesting paradigm difference between kind of where you're approaching the question from and I am. So to me, it's like if the business has a certain amount of time they want to invest, and they have a certain amount of money that they're willing to spend, I mean, anybody can want anything. What did somebody say this morning that's kind of like, I want a pony by Christmas? Oh, no, that was, you guys might not have been in that talk. That was Patrick Wilson Welsh's talk, right? When the business comes and it says, hey, I need to have everything by a certain time within this amount of money, they're basically saying, I want a pony, right? I mean, they might be able to get it, but I believe as project managers, and this is where I think project managers can help in Agile teams, especially larger Agile organizations, is that I'm constantly communicating with my business stakeholders, and I'm going, I know what you want, right? And I know the time, and the amount of money and the amount of time you've given me to do it. It gets into kind of the situation where I get asked a lot where, well, what do I do if my executive says you have to do everything within this time and cost, and all three constraints are fixed right out of the gate. I personally think that those kinds of the projects are the ones that fail. Because you just can't pull that stuff out of the air. Okay? So as a project manager, I'm faced with two decisions. I can either say, okay, we'll just do it, right? We'll just do our best. We'll get to the last possible moment of plausible deniability. And then we'll go, okay, we're out, right? It's going to be another 3 or 4 months. Happens all the time in software projects. Or maybe it's out another year. Okay, I was working with one team trying to generate a little bit of business that was 18 months late on their current release, right? Because they were just building and trying to get everything in. What I typically do on an Agile project is I'll say, I understand what you want, okay? I understand that what you want is fixed. I also understand that the time and cost that you've allocated to this is fixed. If that's the situation that I'm being put into, then I'm still going to use Agile. I'm going to still do everything that I told you. But I'm going to give my business stakeholder feedback as quickly as possible. Hey, we made this assumption. We validated this assumption. This assumption proved invalid. This is what it does to the backlog. Okay, it's either growing, it's contracting, we're on track, we're not on track. I want to put my business stakeholders in a position where they can make business decisions around the software that I'm delivering. And what I find personally is that executives, when given data and given the facts and everything being transparent, will generally make good business decisions. Okay? There's this one executive that I worked with at one time, and he's like, hey, can we move the data in 3 months? You know, you say, well, do I get twice the number of people? Do I get, you know, what do I get, you know? And we had this conversation, and I said, you know, here's your trade-offs, because I can't make that decision for you. This is the estimate that the team gave me. This is what I think we can do based on our past performance. What do you want to do? And he looked at the data and went, you know what? We need to hold the date. We can't do this. Right? And so again, I think it's all about getting the business data early so they can make the appropriate trade-offs. And that means that sometimes that there's stuff left over at the end, I guess to tie back to your question. But they didn't find that out in the 11th hour of the project. It was predicted from the very beginning, and they were able to mitigate that risk and make trade-offs as they went. That's how I think about it. Yes, ma'am?
I was kind of add to that, like when you're building a software, you're always kind of making an assumption how this software is going to be used.
Mm-hmm.
And unless you really start actually using it, because even the business people, lots of time they don't know. Because lots of time you have end users outside the business office and all those. You really don't know actually how business process is going to be impacted or how software is going to be used.
Yep.
And you know what are the drawbacks and what kind of modification. And what I've seen, the issue backlogs and all those. I mean, lots of time the things that we didn't do in the first phase never actually got done because at the end business said, you know, I really don't need it, but instead of this other things,
Yeah.
people in the field are telling me, you know, we got to do it, so do those three instead of this.
Yeah, so in the presence of feedback, you can make those trade-offs as you go. And so as I look at it, you know, it kind of takes the primary scope metric. It focuses less on what's all the features that I want to build and puts it on what is the value that I want to get out of this project. I have something that I want to be able to sell. Okay, I want to be able to get a return on that investment. Okay, so now we're making scope decisions, feature decisions, requirement decisions to hit that financial target. I think that's the key. Anybody else? Yeah.
How do you factor quality into that? Is that just part of the cost?
Yeah, so to me, you know, so Jim Highsmith was talking a while ago. He's kind of doing some things like trying to change the constraints of project management. Some people put, you know, they call the triple constraints of project management a square, that kind of a thing, where you have time, cost, scope, and quality as a variable that you can play with. I personally tend to think of quality as an attribute of scope. Okay? So we can choose to build more of a feature, less of a feature, that kind of a thing. We can make intentional decisions to put low quality code out and market faster. But to use Agile language, it comes down to the definition of done. Right? And so if I've got to build a medical system that's going to keep somebody's heart running, or you know, a jet airplane in the sky, I have a very, very high standard for the definition of done. When I write a blog post, you know, I might proof check it once, right? Because it's like it's better for me to get the idea out and off my plate than it is to make sure everything's perfectly grammatically correct. Okay, it's just different orders of scale, in my opinion. So to me, quality becomes part of scope. It becomes part of definition of done. Anybody disagree with that? There's definitely other ways of looking at it. Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, kind of to follow up. I look at it the same way, where quality is a function of scope, and if you don't have good quality per se, then you really didn't implement that feature. It's not done.
Unless it was acceptable to have a Sev3 defect in it or something like that, you know?
Which just means your scope was different.
It means your scope's a little bit different. Yeah.
But the real, I guess, with that whole definition of the three-legged stool of project management, really is a matter of risk.
There you go.
That's the important factor. Is
Right.
How much risk are they willing to take?
Yep.
And then, because the more risk you want to take, or the more risk you want to eliminate,
Yep.
the more expensive things are going to cost.
Yep.
Which means your process has to be defined more.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So now when we start thinking about agile delivery, okay, what we have is we have this, let's go back to this real quick since we talked. So we've broken these things down progressively as we go. We get them down to a place where we have an actionable backlog that we're working against. And now what we do is we have that backlog. That backlog goes into the team. And in Scrum and XP, the team's kind of largely a black box. You know, so the product owner says, hey, this is what we're going to build. Team says, this is how we're going to build it. They go through the process over a 2-week period. and then they emerge with working software on the backside. I can measure the amount of working software that I've done. I can compare it against the overall size of the backlog. I can start measuring the rate of decrease across that backlog. I can derive metrics like earned value. Okay? Anybody trying to do earned value on Agile projects? I personally think you can. The problem with earned value on most software projects, and the reason why it's kind of reviled, is because on traditional waterfall projects, we claim value against artifacts. We claim value against hours worked against the project. If we're actually building working software, well then we can start claiming value against that. And velocity, I think, is a pretty decent metric for being able to claim value. Okay, so we can start doing some of these kinds of things. Okay, and then we get feedback from the process. So we have the backlog, we build the software, we look at the software, we inspect, we feed back up to the business, and allow the business to further tailor what it is that we're going to build. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about the question we had earlier in the back, and I'm almost wondering, can we really say for Agile projects that when you finish, there's almost always a backlog? You never complete all the scope because there's usually an unlimited amount of requests from the stakeholder group.
I think that's fair. I mean, I don't know you'd say that for every project, but I think that's there was this great quote from, I think it was George Lucas when they re-released the Star Wars films. He said something like, great movies are never finished, they're only ever abandoned. You know, I mean, there's always more that you could have done, but at some point in time, you actually got to get the product out the door. Yeah.
So, like on that note, it's like a paradigm shift for the users, really.
It's huge.
So than our team, because we're telling them, hey, look, we're estimating it's going to cost about this to build X,
Mm-hmm.
and then we say, oh, to try and educate them on this process. Hey, you can put whatever you want on the backlog, and we'll prioritize it.
Right.
We'll adapt, and we'll do it all this way. And then we get to the end of this project. And we have, and they may have looked at it, throughout the time. They're like, yeah, it looks great, coming along, looks great.
Mm-hmm.
We get to the end, and they got 50 things on the backlog that to us, we were like, well, they were your low priorities, so
Mm-hmm.
you didn't build them in. But to them, they're like, well, I need all those things. And
Right.
I want them all for the cost that you gave me.
Right.
So now, now there's and this is very real situations, happened to us a couple of times.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, like, if is that an education, faux pas on our part for telling people, hey, just tell us everything you want. We're going to deliver.
Yeah, I think it's an education. I think there is an element of education on the front side. So as you guys learn language for dealing with this and communicating to your customers, I think it also sounds like that there's maybe some degree of disengagement from the process as you guys are building. Because one of the things that I do, again, because I approach this I take kind of the project management aspect of this stuff seriously, okay? So I'm constantly communicating with my stakeholders. I'm not assuming that they're understanding those trade-offs. I would love to have a product owner or a customer that just was there with the team and totally got it. But if they don't, I'm letting them know, hey, this is what the decision we're making. This is why we're making the decision. Here's your trade-offs. This is the implications of that trade-off, okay? And I think having some of that language at the beginning of that engagement to say, is time and cost the primary constraint? Yes, if it is. And so now what we've got to do is we've got to figure out how to get the business value out of this as quickly as possible. This is the approach we're going to take. Here's the trade-offs that I'm going to ask from you. Okay? And in general, you should be able to commit to a scope at some level of abstraction and hit it, right? So you might want to be able to add reporting. But exactly what reports you're going to get, I don't know just yet, right? You might want to be able to add the ability to do a financial transaction online. But maybe we don't have the ability to cancel that just yet. Or maybe I want to be able to communicate electronically with my B2B customers, and we're going to enable it ultimately to do flat files or something over the URL or some sort of web services call, something like that. Maybe you get 2 out of the 3, right? That's how you vary it. So you get the marketing line, you get the ability to sell to the customer, but the actual detailed implementation might have to be, part of it might have to be saved for later. There's just not a one-size-fits-all for this, but those are the kinds of trade-offs that you're managing. Another thing, a lot of times when I'm talking with technical folks, is that sometimes people will say, well, this is the only way it could be implemented, right? Well, sometimes there's a lot of room in terms of how complicated or how robust the implementation is. So those are kind of scope trade-offs that